So, welcome to the latest episode of the And Why Is That podcast. A very interesting, intellectually stimulating conversation I'm sure we'll have today with our guest, Squadron Leader retired of the RAAF, Hugh Dolan, who has a very colourful history that he will share with us. I'll let him tell the story best, but one of the, I assume, very few people who's been in military intelligence with the British Army and with the Australian forces as well, and in two very active theatres in the Balkans in the 90s and in Iraq in the Gulf War II. Alexander, we'll probably venture into some areas around what's been going on in the Middle East at the moment.
Well, there has been a fair bit of activity over there in recent times, and some of it's been quite eye-opening in terms of what the intelligence services have been up to, as far as we know, and undoubtedly more will be coming out of it.
So, Hugh, why don't you take us through a potted history? I did love your CV on. You've written a number of books, particularly on Gallipoli, and we would love to talk to you about that probably before Anzac Day next year. It would be terrific. But your knowledge there is unsurpassed. But you wrote a wonderful piece about yourself in one of the introductions to the book I saw, that you were posted to the Balkans during the Balkan Wars to find Radovan Karadzic, yes. And then you were posted to Iraq to find Saddam Hussein.
Correct.
You failed to find both and then visited the optometrist.
That's right. The optometrist told me that I needed bifocals.
Yes.
And, so you should have gone to Specsavers then.
Eventually I did.
Yes.
Not that they are a sponsor.
No, not yet anyway.
But we're happy to take the sponsorship. So Hugh, do take us a little bit through your history, and then we want to sort of discuss the whole topic of military intelligence and bring it home to what is being seen by us, but the unseen, which is much more interesting, that you might be able to fill in the details of.
Compared to war, everything else is trivia. I have been studying war in its many forms over I suppose over 30 years. I find it the most interesting and exhausting of all topics. It usually is the turning point in cultures and countries, and not to understand it is to be a fool. And it's surprising when we look at the last 100 years how few have understood it and had ventured into war to great mishap.
The people who are instigating the war you refer to, I assume.
Yes, it is more or less a trend that in the last 100 years, those countries which were belligerents, that is, started a war and maybe invaded another country's territory, failed. They got beaten. So therefore, one wonders, why did they do that? Because the belligerent did it by choice. So what is going wrong? And the answer lies squarely at the foot of intelligence in all its forms.
Right. So there is a... We'll interrogate that a little bit further, but in a moment. But there is a... often it's supposedly a joke, but it's only said by generally people, those who've never been involved in war and have no understanding of the intelligence that's required, that military intelligence is a contradiction in terms. I mean, it's
an oxymoron.
Actually,
yes.
Oxymoron. Let me correct you in your own insult.
Yes, yes. Well, it's of Greek origin anyway, so you're probably right with the pronunciation. Yes, but yeah, I mean, it's used in a joke and everything from the Blackadder to wherever, because it's humorous to poke fun at those who have that position of authority to begin a war or indeed to fight even a defensive war. There is fun to be had after the fact and to poke fun at those at what they know is always a good place to start. But you can't possibly have witnessed the last few weeks that we've been witnessing and the endeavours of the Israelis and the Americans against Iran without realising that all of that wonderful, accurate targeting that they boast about, and probably a whole bunch of the not so good targeting that they don't boast about, happens only because of deep intelligence, one assumes.
That is correct. Assume this. Every country, every nation has in a safe files on how they can attack their neighbours. Every country. And every year they update them as technologies improve or there are changes perhaps in culture or leadership. But understand that we all have off-the-shelf plans.
And these are the plans that would have been developed again and again and again and again over 47 years against the Iranian regime.
Since the revolution,
Since
yes.
the revolution. Is that intel primarily human and then corroborated by the high-tech methodologies we have today? Is it still reliant upon a large proportion of human intel?
It depends on the nation. As a general rule, the Israelis and the British use human intelligence, and they have what is called the trained huminter. I was one of those in the British Army. So I joined a squadron where we focused on interrogation and observational techniques and ways of garnering information through softly processes. And also how to recognize when other countries are trying to do it to us. So, as it were, the spy catcher. That's what my company were more or less trained to do.
But how do you determine that the human intel that you've received is not misinformation? I mean, it's obviously it's a shadowy game, is it not? That the other side is trying to, they know you're trying to find out about them, and they're probably trying to feed you something that's incorrect. I would certainly think of doing that if I were them.
Oh, that's a sharp question. And let me answer that with a couple of facts. So after a individual is debriefed, there is in fact an alphanumeric on the top of the file that, alpha from A to E and 1 to 5. A is that the person being interviewed actually is in a position to know exactly what they're talking about. So, for instance, it might be the Minister of Defence,
right,
or somebody in that department, and that would be an alpha. And 1 would suggest we have other reports that corroborate it. So that would be A1, which means you'd look at that file, you'd digest it, and you'd suggest with a very high probability it's likely to be correct. The obverse of that would be echo, E, which is we don't know whether this person was in or is in a position that would know. And 5, there is no other corroborating evidence.
It's funny it's called echo.
Yes. Now, here's a point, and here's the nub of it. Australia went to war in 2003 with Iraq. I know. I was there. I was deployed twice in the first and third rotation as an intelligence officer. And the casus belli, the reason for our attack on Iraq, was down to single source intelligence. A supposed Iraqi brigadier who defected to the CIA was held in a safe house and gave his captors positive answers generally to all the questions that were asked.
Gave them what they wanted to hear.
Yeah. How do we know this? Well, thank you for the Brits, because they, after their excursion in Iraq and their regret for entering into that war, the British Parliament gave the commission to Lord Chilcot to investigate the causes for war, why Britain entered the war in 2003. And Lord Chilcot wrote an exhaustive 100,000-page report, of which the conclusion is some 2,000 pages, if I remember, quite exhaustive. And this is what he directs. This is what he finds, that the CIA based all of their principal intelligence on this brigadier, this defector. And I should be very clear, I'm not breaking any confidentiality here. I'm going off Lord Chilcot's report, right? Not my own studies at the time when I was in defence. That there were no Admiralty grade ratings, there was no alphanumeric. And so it appeared as multi-source intelligence. It was in fact concocted.
Isn't that a failure of process, or as much as anything else, that the intelligence that was received was not double-checked or corroborated by somebody from within the American defence system?
You would think so. And you may remember Colin Powell, and I have to say that correctly because that's how he insisted his name being, how we wanted to be called, giving address to the UN Security Council.
Yes, with the pictures and
with the pictures of sarin gas trucks.
Yes.
Now, I have a story about that.
Oh, well, okay.
Right, of sarin gas trucks. I can say this, and this is absolutely fine. I was posted at that time to the Australian Joint Intelligence Centre in Sydney, and my role was to do an assessment with a very, very smart female captain. We were paired. She was the brains and I was the clown, more or less. She was an army captain. She was very smart, Army Intelligence Corps. She was doing the order of battle of Iraq, and I was doing enemy intentions. So they had the clown think, as it were, that terrible term, outside the box. And the very smart, intelligent ex-infantry officer, then intelligence officer, do how the enemy will fight and what is their characteristics of fighting.
Yep.
Anywho, I can say this, there was no information at all about sarin gas trucks. And
So-
to have it revealed on television
Yes.
in front of a worldwide audience, something that would be really in the top secret realm, was just incredible, really.
Well, it was theatre.
It was theatre. I was sitting at home with my wife in Sydney, and we were watching it on telly, and of course she saw me go puce and scream and throw a pillow at the television, or a cushion at the television, and she said, "Honey, what's wrong?" And I said, "I just don't understand where they're getting this information from."
So was it just theatre, or did
It
they
was
have another
made
source?
up.
It was made up.
And that's what Lord Chilcot's report tells us. It was purely fabricated.
Why did they go to so much bother? Did they not have any other excuses or reasons that they could deploy?
Correct. Because the cupboard was bare. There was nothing in Mother Hubbard's cupboard.
But isn't that also a failure then of intelligence? That they,
Indeed it is.
So they hadn't done
and
the
this is the
homework.
nub which we were trying. This is the point we're trying to get to, is that these failures of intelligence occur when military intelligence itself is politicized.
Right.
And you may suggest this it certainly happened in Afghanistan.
Mm-hmm.
How could reports from the military administration in Afghanistan give all the metrics for success over the 13-year military occupation? And there were hundreds of metrics of success, insurgents captured or killed, roads built, hospitals built. And to see Afghanistan collapse in 3 weeks. An ice cream truck starting from one border of Afghanistan and driving to the far eastern border was the speed of the collapse.
Yeah, and that's clearly there was a degree of arrogance, obviously.
Lie.
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 Yeah. Okay. So
And-
you think they were not accurately reporting what was happening on the ground because that's not reflected by what happened in those few days.
Correct.
Yes.
But again, that was political expediency, presumably directed from the Pentagon or from
Well,
somebody within the
so-
Oval Office.
Wait. I've got to be careful here because there may have been voices crying in the wilderness saying this is wrong. You are providing CENTCOM, right? You are providing our general commanding duff information. And that voice was shouted down. And there may have been a number of voices doing this, but still the prevailing response was that the metrics are being met.
Right.
Rather than this, ladies and gentlemen,
Is a mess.
is a very hollow campaign or operation, and it is prone to immediate failure.
But the longer any campaign goes on, the more effort goes into propping up the justifications.
Well, we're seeing
for
that
the
at the
campaign.
moment with the Russia
Yeah.
and Ukraine.
Yeah.
Oh, that's an interesting point. Let's look at that for a moment.
Yes, let's.
Go ahead. What can you tell me? What do you think about Russia's capability at this stage?
Okay, so interestingly, when this all started in February of 2022, with the blitzkrieg invasion that ran out of fuel on the way to Kiev because the generals had stolen the fuel, is what we're led to believe. That may be true, maybe not, but and sold it on the black market. But we know there's rife corruption in the Russian army. It is a mafia state after all. So this all began, and people were thinking this is going to be World War III. Well, my assessment at the time, when I saw the first sign of Russian incompetence, was no, this is going to be World War I. And that's pretty much what it is with drones.
But again, because Putin was fed
Because Putin was
fake
told
intel
that
by
he
his
could
people.
waltz in, there'd be no resistance, and his crack troops, who turned out not to be crack at all,
Teenagers.
were going to just be welcomed like conquering heroes.
Is that not an example of gross incompetence as far as military intelligence is concerned?
Couldn't be a more
I
stark
couldn't be
one.
more stark.
Yeah.
But that also, again, feeds back to the culture within the leadership of that country, that they will not accept news they don't want to hear.
Oh, that's true. The dissenting voices very quickly step down. Fortunately, in the Australian Defence Force, we don't have that. We allow for dissenting voices.
Okay.
We are very fortunate in our the Australian intelligence community, both military and civilian. We have talented individuals with a limitation.
Right. So what we're uncovering here is when we've started talking about the value of military intelligence, is that rather like the public service, it's really only of value if it's allowed to be frank and fearless. And if it's not, if it's compromised by people's political decisions, career decisions, all of those sorts of things, to feed the information that the king wants to hear, let's put it in ancient terms, yeah? The jester used to get away with telling him the truth as a joke up to a point, up to a point, up to a
Yes.
point. And even there's a limit, yeah? But don't kill the messenger is a saying for a reason, yeah?
There's also another reason, John. You're correct. But there's another reason, and it's the military imperative, such as an example of Gallipoli, something very close to the heart of Australia, where we see our foundation myth. The intelligence prior to the landing was A1, exclamation mark. The commanders knew exactly what was waiting for them on shore and what numbers and what capability. In fact, the Australian commander of Anzac knew of the appointment of General Lehman von Sanders to the Fifth Army to defend the Gallipoli Peninsula 3 days before the general's own staff knew because of a spy in the Harbinieri in the headquarters of the Turkish army. And that information was sent by telegraph to Cairo, where it was passed on the next day to Anzac headquarters. So one can know about what the enemy have, what their capabilities are, but still one has to conduct the attack because one is ordered to. And you face the dilemma of saying, shall I do it knowing that I might not be successful, or shall I step out and probably allow someone less competent to do it?
In which case it'll be an even bigger mess.
Correct.
Yes. It's the devil in a deep
It's a
blue sea.
terrible dilemma
Yes.
that commanders face.
Yes.
But again, that's a cultural or process-driven failing where the political command doesn't respond to the realities on the ground.
Oh, how very true. So rarely is a commander of a task force given the tools necessary to complete the job.
Yeah, just do the best you can.
Rarely. And perhaps this explains why in the last 100 years the aggressor has failed, has lost the war.
Let's just turn for a moment to, so we mentioned briefly the Ukraine-Russia quagmire. We may well come back to that. But the one that's exercising everyone's minds at the moment, and this has been recorded on the 28th of May, by the time we have it on air in a week or two, God goodness knows where we're at. We spoke with Dale Heineken, captain of the Boxer, retired, and just as hostilities were about to break out, and we were talking about what is a strike group and so on and so forth, and we're impressed by the weight that could be brought to bear, and yet you made a comment off air before we came on air about the changing intentions, and the flightiness, for want of a better word, or the unpredictability, if you want to put it in those terms, it may be something more positive, of the great orange man. One minute we're close to a deal. Today we're not satisfied with the deal. Literally today we're not satisfied with the deal. Yesterday we're 9/10 there for the deal. Are we just playing the stock market? Probably. But how does this play out for the men and women on the ground? I mean, how do they know what their objective is if all we're doing is now we're just occasionally firing off a few missiles, allegedly in a defensive posture against the Iranians? We started off with regime change. Where the hell are we now?
Well, I'm not particularly clever. I stand on the shoulders of officers and NCOs that have taught me through the years my craft. One of those was a corporal back in the UK who was captured by the Argentinians in the General Post Office in the Falklands Islands. Imagine learning one's craft from a man like that. He drilled into me that if I am looking at a campaign, even if it's on a map, 1 to 10,000 scale, or 1 to 50,000, or a joint operational graphic, 1 to 50,000, 150,000, so very large scale, look at it through the known 10 principles of war. Now, the 10 principles of war are what the West, and now also Asia, militaries use to eviscerate conflict, to pull it apart, and to use it for planning. And these 10 principles cover everything from surprise, of course, no surprise there, concentration of effort,
Yep.
security,
Yeah.
you can imagine. But the first of all is the selection and maintenance of the aim,
So being clear about your
targets.
objective.
Yeah.
and not changing it at all.
But no plan survives first contact with the enemy. So
Correct?
doesn't that then require you to be more flexible with your targeting and your
How
and your
clever of you.
aims?
Flexibility is one of the 10 principles of war.
But that doesn't negate the
But the
necessity.
aim stays the same.
Yes, exactly. It doesn't negate that aim.
That's
You made
right.
the point again off air that Gulf War One, which is George H.W. Bush, where he got the coalition of the willing together, was remarkably successful
Yes.
for that
It's-
reason.
Yes, the aim selected was the liberation of Kuwait.
That's all.
Yes, and despite the resounding success the coalition of the willing had over the Iraqi army, they stopped at the Kuwaiti border, Iraqi border, and went no further because that was the declared war aim. Full stop, achieved success. Now, what we've seen with the attacks with Iran is a changing set of objectives. My understanding, the first objective was to secure and deny the Iranians the use of atomic weaponry,
Correct. And still remains.
and still remains so.
Yes.
And then it became a push towards regime change.
Which has somewhat fallen off the agenda for some reason.
Yes, it has, and it's confusing.
Yes.
Well, they have wiped out a few layers of
Yes.
regime leadership.
Well, that's
So
a
they
very
now-
broad definition of regime change.
So now they're waiting to see what happens based on the experience that they had in Venezuela,
Yes.
which was
But
you get rid of one level and maybe the level below is a little bit more.
We did
flexible.
see Trump attempt to frame that as successful regime change because one level of Ayatollahs and IRGC commanders had disappeared into dust, and therefore we're dealing with much more. He actually literally said we're dealing with much more reasonable people.
Which just proves
are
how
we?
little he knows about
Well,
the people.
are
he's dealing
we?
with.
I go even further. This is not going to end. I actually sympathise a little with the Iranians in that the West has killed their Pope and the Pope's
Yes.
son, in a
Yes.
way.
Yes.
I mean, I'm very simplistic here. I'm not particularly articulate.
Just, but still remembering, as you would know, that the Iranians are Persians, not Arabs. So
Indeed.
So the imposition of Mohammedanism is still in some Iranians' minds, not necessarily their indigenous religious faith.
Okay. Yes, I concede that. But
But still, 30% of the population is
it is a theocracy.
is very.
It's still a
supportive of that.
Very
theocracy by
supportive,
definition.
yes,
The
yeah.
Republic of Iran is a
Yes,
theocracy, and so its constitution is framed that way. So this war will only end when the last Iranian zealot says it's over.
It's over. Yeah.
Not when.
That's become perfectly clear.
Well,
Yes.
and the zealots don't change their spots,
Zealots fight to the death.
They do.
Yeah.
which means boots on
I'm
the
very
ground.
respectful of zealots. I remember the attack on the World Trade Center in New York with, I think there were 8 to 12 young men that committed themselves to that action. Deplorable, terrible as it was. But to call them cowards.
No, they
as
weren't that.
No, that's what they were not.
No. They were
We have to be very careful with how we frame our
Zealotry
enemy.
to the point of insanity, but not cowardice.
No, not insanity.
Well, we would
Desperation.
think so.
No, I think desperation and
Yes.
commitment.
Okay.
So
It's very difficult for any of us to understand that, and living in a
how do you say that when at Anzac Day
Well,
we
okay.
hear this trope? And by the way, this is something I'm campaigning against. Is the term sacrifice when looking at the Australian fallen?
Mhm.
Sacrifice is a religious term meaning atonement of sin to a vengeful God.
This is true.
No, in no way were our Australian dead in the First World War atoning to some vengeful
no,
God.
they were not. No.
Point one. And point two, I've read diaries and orders, certainly across the First World War at some depth, and there is no indication that any of these young men or women in the nursing trade ever wanted to lay down their lives. They wanted to live.
Yes, of course they did.
Yes. And unfortunately, their lives were taken. So sacrifice is a terrible term, but we use it.
Well, we do, but
we deify this. So we are
But
at risk here.
We're getting into a different argument here.
I beg your pardon.
But I would argue that that's a matter of national attempt of national cohesion and healing. To give
It's
it
also-
to give it that pseudo-religious.
But it's also a way of making the death of young people more palatable.
Yeah, that's what I mean. It's part of the healing.
What, that they bare their throat at the altar?
Yeah, well, that's taking the literal meaning.
Garlands with flowers, lowing like a cow at the altar. Please,
But we don't
slit my
view
throat.
it that way anymore because it's been the meaning has been.
Well, I think it takes the
changed.
dignity away of our
possible.
soldiery and our airmen, aviators, and Navy
They
personnel.
were fighting to survive. That's what they were fighting
Correct.
to do.
Thank you.
Yeah.
But I'm just putting it in context, you see, because
As with the exception of suicide bombers, as we've just mentioned, generally
it's one step. What I'm trying to say, it's one small step from calling our soldiers, willing participants in this process to become a martyr.
yes, that is
A very small step.
yeah, it is a small semantic step, but. The point that you were making, though, was that zealots are to be respected in a military
Indeed.
sense
Indeed, they are.
because they stop at nothing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so where does this end in Iran at the moment? As you said, when the last of the zealots either gives up his zealotry, and it's generally a he, or is dead.
Correct. Now, if you look at it a little bit with a finer lens, we understand, we're talking about the geography of the Straits of Hormuz. We're talking about a bent sausage, 60 kilometres long, about 12 kilometres wide, 14 kilometres wide. It's not so much a question of the Iranians defending with drones or missiles, but simple artillery and mortar tubes can close that strait with
'Cause they have the
3
range.
young men
Yeah.
and a
Yeah.
pair of binoculars,
They got the
and
range.
80 rounds can stop that strait. So it can never really be opened.
Yeah, unless you completely clear that all that area out.
You cannot. One cannot.
Well, there are complications, as I understand it, because there are
It
different
is-
tribes as
I
well.
would call it an impossibility.
Right.
It's absolutely implausible.
Do you think that the Great Orange Man? Sorry, Alexander, I'll let you jump in a second. Do you think that Trump has been told this and that he understands this? Is this why this pause has been going on for so long, and there seems to be more of a motivation to extend the pause with occasional skirmishes just to show, oh, we're boss? Is that something he's understood? His commanders have been able to make him understand?
Absolutely. There are very bright people in the US military. Very bright people. They're patriots and they're dedicated. And I don't think they would consider a land attack even just on a coastal area as a plausible operation with any chance of success. Given the zealotry of the Iranian Republican Guard Corps and, let's say, a third of their population, if not more, at the thought of alien invader upon their soil. We go back to the first proposition, aggressors lose.
Yeah, nothing unites a country more than somebody attacking them.
Oh, I agree further. Now, there's another little thing I wanted to tease out, and excuse me for doing this. I've been reading widely, and of course the internet is a wonderful source for this. Of course, everyone these days are talking about drones. It is such I think, a break in military doctrine that we're seeing that we need to rewrite military doctrine. It reminds me of the 1920s when we first looked at aspects of air power after the First World War.
It's a complete phase change.
That's right. And we had what was called Dewey's Doctrine in 1922, and which was simply said, the bomber always gets through. And this, of course, skewed spending in Britain. Millions, trillions of pounds was spent on building a bomber fleet. And in fact, by, I think, 1934, enough cement had been laid in the south of England with airfields, they could have built a two-lane highway to Beijing. A massive skew to the economy and the war effort through the war. Now we have something as capricious as that. We have the idea of drones, and we're only seeing the first generation of drones that can be used and applied on the battlefield that will defeat all our current air defences. So defence of the air and control of the air is now completely changed. So this has a feature now in the Straits of Hormuz. And I think an example of this, and you're quite right to say that POTUS, President of the United States, is using other means to coerce. And I think the blocking of Iranian shipping
Is a much smarter move.
is a fabulous move.
Yes.
Well, it's a kind of a checkmate.
It is a
as well.
checkmate. Well done.
Yeah.
It's passive as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
What a brilliant stroke.
So he's not as unhinged and uncontrolled as people would suggest based on the actions that have just occurred.
Well, he may be, but he's taking advice from people who are a bit smarter.
I've heard we've ventured into a much deeper analysis of what's going on right now and may not be going on in 2 weeks, but definitely I think based on what you said about zealotry will be in some fashion or other. But Marco Rubio, as the Secretary of State, has appeared and emerged far more so than the Vice President and the Secretary for War as a erudite, capable, and at least presenting as highly rational interpreter of what's going on and in providing information to the waiting public through the media. The media, we all know, and one of the reasons we're here is the media tend not to ask the second question. That's why
Why is that?
Yes,
Oh,
exactly.
Well,
Exactly.
read The Australian.
Yes, exactly.
Read
So-
David Cameron.
Yeah. So Rubio made a very valid point, I thought, and I'd be interested in your view. He said, look, we had to remove their ability to develop nuclear arms. That was a prime objective, and it, as you've pointed out, remains an objective. The other objectives become a little vague. But in order to ensure that we could have the ability to take out any future attempts to develop nuclear weapons, we had to substantially degrade their dome of protection over those sites, which includes, therefore, the many thousands of missile sites, naval capacity, all of the other things that they would use in future to stop you from actually getting in and doing what they did in June and what they did in February and March. That seemed like a pretty rational sort of analysis or explanation of what was going on. I'm sure much more is going on. Does that seem to make sense?
It does. When I think of the Republic of Iran, I see a nation that has been preparing for this since its foundation in 79. And we've recently learned that the Americans are attempting to interdict the Iranian ability to make drones, certain factories which are deliberately dotted through their outer suburbs to make targeting difficult. Right?
And
how clever.
Yes.
So this is a country that plans. Persians have typically, they, as you know, under Darius and Xerxes, they rule the known world.
Yes.
They're the most powerful nation on earth, and still hold that title.
At that
time, of course.
Yes.
So these are not fools. I am more concerned what I call the course of action we don't know. So I was asked to teach or to help young intelligence officers in the Air Force learn their trade. And I used to hold up my hand and say, your first is the most likely but least dangerous course of action that the enemy will do. And then there is the most dangerous but less likely. So it's the inverse.
Yeah.
But the fifth one is the one we don't know about.
It's
The known, the unknown.
Donald Rumsfeld.
Is the unknown.
Unknowns.
Now, here I'm going to say, and this is what keeps me awake at night, that we know as a fact that the International Atomic Energy Commission announced that that country has so many kilograms of, fissile material?
Yes.
Right, that's, concentrated isotope to make into a nuclear bomb of some description. Well, they've had that probably for a while. They're clever people. We also have the capability that Iranians have their own flagged tankers and fleet. I think they have 80, known tankers and proxies as well. What is the possibility that there is some very simple type of briefcase bomb that has this material around an explosive?
Floating around in the tanker.
Yeah.
Yes, and already in a Western country.
Could be just sitting
Coming
around
to a
waiting
port
be-
near you.
Yeah.
Yes. Now, this is the sum of all fears,
Yes.
I'm aware. As Winston said, you get the most trepid airman, the bravest soldier, and the keenest naval officer on the table, and what do you get? You get the sum of all fears.
Yes.
So be careful. Be careful of what one thinks and capability one gives to one's enemy. But this is an enemy that has been prepared for this war with the US since the birth of its republic. I cannot see them losing.
I would say that perhaps it's not in the best interests of the world, the Americans, to drive out the theocratic rulers of Iran, because unless you are able to literally kill every last one of them,
They'll keep bouncing back.
they will disperse amongst the diaspora of Iranians and hide themselves there and cook up all sorts of trouble onshore for the.
So your theory
the
that
coalition.
that he's hoping for a regime change in the same sense of Venezuela. Look, we'll take the troublesome guy out, and we'll let the lady who's being friendly there, and she'll do what we ask her to do, and then everyone makes money, and we're all happy, and the Chinese pay much more for their oil.
Because
and that's an even better bonus for us.
A generational change brings new thinking, even if the son of the Ayatollah is radical in some way, because he's a generation younger, he's going to have a different
It's going to be
perspective.
Yeah, it's going to be fascinating to see what sort of deal our friend, the art of the deal, comes up with. Because
I'm going to ask a question.
Yeah, go on.
And I wonder this. At CENTCOM, or wherever they're planning for the attacks on the Straits, wherever it is being planned, do they actually have a Shia Muslim on their staff?
Good question. I wonder if
Because-
you'd think you would, wouldn't you?
Not when we went to Iraq in 2003. On our staff, we didn't, as far as I knew, we did not have one Arabic-speaking intelligence officer with
That's
us.
a bit of an oops.
Oh, isn't that an oops?
Yeah.
Now, in Gallipoli in 1915, Anzac headquarters had 2 Ottoman interpreters
Right.
on the ship on the day of the landing
Yes.
to be able to
Do
translate
you know, this
letters and diaries. That's
Yes.
what we had in 1915.
Yes.
We didn't have it in 2003. Furthermore, the Japanese 15th Army
Yes.
invasion of the Malay Peninsula, the invading general, in his preparation, he only had 8 months preparation, found 2 Japanese Muslims, placed them on the staff. He made one a lieutenant and the other a sergeant, and they were to inform the military planners on the makeup of the Islamic schools across Java.
The madrasas.
Yes.
Yes.
Pusatama Lama,
Yeah.
I think it's a term.
Yeah.
So they were being informed, so they knew, and that they had a list of 35 key Islamic leaders in Java,
That they needed.
including Muhammad Hatta
Mm.
and Sukarno,
Mm. Mm.
before they set foot onto Javanese soil. That's what the Japanese army did. We certainly didn't have that, and we
You know,
invaded Iraq.
this goes back
There-
to
There's something wrong at the moment with the West.
It's part of the arrogance.
It's a
of-
hubris. Yes, it's a hubris.
It's hubristic, yes.
Yes.
But this goes back to there's a very clear example in something else I was paying some study to, and that was that's the colonisation, discovery, call it what you will, of New Zealand, my home country, and it was first colonised by the Maori some 400 years before whitefellas got there. Although revisionist history pretends that didn't happen, it did. Abel Tasman turned up in 16, I forget the precise
1640s.
40s,
probably.
yeah, 1640s. It was the 1640s. Found his way into the Marlborough Sounds and ended up at a place that's since been named Murderer's Cove because he had no knowledge of the people he was about to encounter. And they turned up in their war canoes doing the traditional haka, which is a challenge and a welcome. And you were supposed to respond in an appropriate fashion of, yep, we're here just to be friends and not... And they started firing on them.
Yes, yes. Responding with cannon, probably.
And not unreasonably, the Maori, who were very good warriors, boarded their boats and killed a bunch of his men and then buggered off. And Tasman went, I'm not landing here, I'm going. And hence it was called Murderer's Bay. He didn't map the place, didn't do anything, he just buggered off. Got a sea named after him, which is some compensation. Cook turned up 130 years later with some knowledge that Polynesians had colonised this part of the world and brought with him a Tahitian priest who spoke a version of the language the Maori speak, a Polynesian dialect similar to the ones that the Maori speak. So when he arrived, there was a little bit of friction, but then the Polynesian priest started chatting to the chiefs, and they found an accommodation. Right? The French also turned up, didn't bring any, bizarrely having been in Polynesia, didn't bring any Polynesians with them, lost 200 men and buggered off. So to your point, long story, but to your point, some knowledge of the local culture or having somebody who understands the local culture makes a huge difference.
Know your enemy.
Yeah.
Quite simple.
And of course, and there's no excuse because the Iranian diaspora here in Australia and
Plenty of them.
Yeah, and the UK, I studied with them. They're the most beautiful people. One couldn't get as good a welcome in any home better than an Iranian home. Most delightful, cultured, intellectually agile.
But they universally loathe the regime back home.
A bit like the Cubans, though.
But do they want their country invaded? Another question, separate question.
It's a terrible dilemma for them.
Yeah.
It really is a terrible dilemma, and I'm sure they feel it also.
Can I just change tack slightly? We spoke earlier on about some failures of military intelligence. Are there some successes of military intelligence that you could speak about that we may or our audience may not know about? Where some moments where a stroke of luck or a year's worth of diligent
20 years worth of diligence.
20 years worth of diligent, nurturing of sources has led to a significant success?
Well, of course. Just about every operational victory is based on good intelligence. In fact, here's a maxim. The outcome of the battle is decided months before both sides meet. Rarely is it a roll of dice. Rarely.
Except if the Americans are involved.
Well, the Hail Mary, yes. So that is an axiom. So generally, the successful side knows the strengths and weaknesses of the enemy, knows the terrain, knows the length of supply line, knows the capability of their generals. Waterloo was the 18th of June, 1815. Most people are familiar with Waterloo. Napoleon standing on the ridge opposite La Haye Sainte, right, in that valley on the road to Brussels, with the Duke of Wellington on the further ridge, let's say 2 kilometres away of a shallow valley. That just didn't happen by happenstance. Our friend, the Duke of Wellington, had ridden down that road 6 months before and noted in his diary that this would be a good place to stop.
Yes.
A French army because of its reverse slope.
Right.
What that meant was, if you imagine that there were 2 ridges, one with a very high ridge, which the French stood upon and put their massive artillery, you then have a 2-kilometre width valley, and then you have another ridge, and it has a slope that is hidden from view from the other ridge, the higher ridge. And the Duke of Wellington used that slope to retreat to, literally, down back beyond the slope, out of sight, and have his men lie down on the ground so they would not be cut to pieces by Napoleon's artillery. That wasn't luck.
No, that was planning.
That was planning.
And intelligence that he'd acquired himself and...
That's right, months before.
Yes. Yes. Well, we would...
So that's first-person
Same
intelligence.
with our landing at Gallipoli.
Yeah.
Did you know that the Anzac intelligence officer, Major Charles Villiers Stewart, 42 years of age, married, a baby on the way, veteran of Afghanistan and the frontier wars, was handpicked by the Anzac commander to be the intelligence officer. And after they had done, on the 14th of April, a beach recce from their warship, I mean, imagine them looking out at the beach. You see Anzac Cove and you see what's called Brighton Beach, where everyone thinks they should have landed, right, and Garba Tepe. And they couldn't see beyond the first ridge. Of course not. It's 400 feet. And you've got 971 feet, the massive. You can't see anything. But what Anzac does is they divert that ship and they put that military intelligence officer in the back of an aeroplane on the island of Bachada, and he flies back over the Gallipoli Peninsula and up and down above Anzac Cove at 4,000 feet, sketching enemy defences. Wow. The British don't do it. The French don't do it. Anzac does it. So the selection of Anzac Cove isn't happenstance. There's no tide. There's nothing like that. That's all hogwash. It was chosen by Charles Villiers Stewart at 4:30 in the morning that this is the place they are going to concentrate their landing.
Because he'd already spied out the lie of the
That's
land.
right. He knew.
Yeah. Well, we talked...
So I mean, that's just one.
Yeah.
Just about every major campaign or battle that was won decisively
Yes.
was won because of good intelligence. Where there is a draw and a stalemate is generally because of poor intelligence.
So I'll bring us to a close. We've been a while.
Oh no, please.
Yeah. Well, I would love to talk for another. We'll get a bottle of wine and
Another
talk for
couple of
another
hours,
3
Can,
hours.
yes.
can we do a 3 hour? Yes.
Absolutely. Bring it back to where we started talking off air, the Battle of Gaugamela, which is a particular favourite of mine, of Alexander the Great and Darius III, the deciding battle in Alexander's global campaigns. It crushed the Persian Empire. And he then marched on to Babylon and became king of Asia. They'd met before at Issus and at Granicus, and he'd won both against superior forces. To your point, at Gaugamela, Darius chose Gaugamela because he had a massive army and he needed a flat plain.
Correct.
That he could maneuver a massive 200,000 person army with chariots and elephants, and which never used, and so on and so for the elephants, and so on and so forth. Alexander liked it because he was able to. He saw his spies knew where Darius was, and had given him information as to the lay of the land, and he was able to park himself over the ridge, leading into the plain, and survey what was going on. He had his spies go and see where the Persians were, and so on and so forth, and come back and report. But the other thing he did is because he knew that the Persian spies were looking at him. He camped on the other side of the ridge, so he was out of direct sight. He made it look like he was going to do the usual thing that you would expect an inferior force to do, a surprise attack at night. And the Persians, before the battle, which began at 10 a.m., stayed up all night expecting a surprise attack because they'd been fed false information. And they were tired and they were hungry, and Alexander and his troops had a nice quiet night and fed up and were ready to go the next morning. We won't go into the details of the battle because they're clouded in mythology and it's a topic for a whole other conversation of how such an inferior force, 35,000, 40,000 men, beat one of 5 times his size. But his intelligence also told him, from his previous experience, if you take out the leader, the rest is a rabble.
Called the centre of gravity
Yeah.
in military doctrine.
Yeah. But that way back 334 BC, the intelligence was a key part of the success that he managed to achieve.
Okay, here's a question.
Yeah.
What is a centre of gravity, therefore, in Iran that the West can press to bring about a favourable outcome?
Well, define
If
favourable
any.
outcome.
Beg your pardon?
Define favourable outcome.
Correct. But let's just say a favourable exit.
Well, what they're doing now, which is
Yes,
blocking their money.
economically strangling.
That's
them.
right.
Economic strangulation.
Yeah.
Correct. There is one other. Water.
Yes.
Tehran is suffering a water crisis.
It's tricky though because the neighbouring Arab states who are hostile to the Iranians and have been for a long time are also similarly vulnerable because they rely on desalination plants.
So
That
if
is
you
their centre of gravity as
it
well.
is water. So if you take out the Iranian water supply, the Iranian retaliation will be to
instantly
take
retire.
out the UAE and the Saudis, and
It's
then
also against the laws of armed conflict.
and it's a war crime.
It's a
because
war
you're,
crime.
You're attacking civilian infrastructure.
So therefore, what I'm, I guess, drawing the thread is the blockading
Is the
of
best.
Iranian
Yes,
ports and the
strategy.
capture of Iranian tankers
Yes.
is a masterstroke.
So there's another example from Alexander Tyre. 7 months it took him to
Hold a siege.
a siege of Tyre, and he built. He built twice. He attempted. The second time he succeeded. He built a bridge to the island, to the fortress island, and then gradually battered them down. But he needed naval power in order to do that. So back to where we're at today, naval power is what's playing the game. Not he tried catapults, and it didn't work.
The
in
air power
Tyre.
of the day.
The air power of the day didn't work. he needed to get naval power. So he went to Sidon and the others and said, I need your ships. And that's how he was able to counter the naval defences of Tyre and build himself the causeway to attack them directly. But patience, it's 7 months.
Well, now we have the fifth element.
Yeah.
Now we have drones. Now we
Yes.
have not what we see today, but what we may see tomorrow, which I know that the US fleet or fleets that are attempting to blockade or are in the region, let's say, operationally focused against blockading Iran, are vulnerable.
They've got
The Israelis are finding in Lebanon at the moment that they're very vulnerable to first-person drone attacks, and they're coming up with ad hoc netting defences for their tanks and their soldiers. But
Correct.
for ships, it's impossible. You can't put a ship under a net. So how do you provide a perimeter through which the drones can't attack?
Well,
You have to stand off.
a science fiction novel written in the 1950s speculated that one day there will be drones the size of mosquitoes.
How do you stop those?
Yes. And they are
But how much damage-
solar
how much damage can
operated.
it do, though?
Literally a swarm.
They recognise the
Yes.
pattern of a uniform
Yeah.
as the enemy uniform. They recognise the shape of a face and they detonate against the adversary's eye.
We've actually seen...
That's the next
I've actually
generation
seen
drone
some-
I'm
Yeah,
talking
it's
I've
getting
seen
about.
very,
some footage
very
like that.
scary.
Yes.
On that scary note,
Yes.
but all of it is learning, and that's fundamentally what military intelligence is all about. You're learning about, as you said, the potential adversary or the actual adversary.
How
Well,
they think
fortunately,
and
in
what they-
Australia, we are well served by our intelligence community. I know, well, certainly when I was there are smart individuals, sharp individuals, dedicated individuals. We are, ladies and gentlemen, in good hands.
Well, if only our government was as smart
on-
as our intelligence organisation.
And
in
on
that
that
case.
disappointing note, as
Yes.
I'm not going to comment on politics.
no. But
That
look,
in
that's been
itself is
fascinating,
cool.
Hugh. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We've covered a lot of ground, and I think the lesson to take out of that is that investment in military intelligence is never wasted as long as it's done properly, one assumes, hopefully, because, as you said, every nation has a bottom drawer full of what we're going to do if we need to take out the neighbour or the neighbour comes to see us.
Has been the case for the last millennium.
It's a sad commentary on human nature, but there you
Yes.
go.
No,
That's
we
what
have
it is.
Compared to warfare, everything else is trivial.
Yeah, thank you.
So, Hugh, my last question, a very important one that I think is a universal question that many millions of people around the world want to know the answer to this question. Who do you think is going to be the next James Bond?
I say this to my girlfriend. The James Bond you see on the screen has a plastic pistol. Mine, honey, was real.
I think that's an audition.
I think
That's
he is
an audition. That's
Yes,
an
yes.
audition. Thank you, Hugh.
Lovely.